The alliance that once looked unstoppable in Philippine politics is now collapsing in full public view. President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. and Vice President Sara Duterte, the two leaders who united under the powerful UniTeam banner in the 2022 elections, are now locked in a political war that could reshape the future of the Philippines and determine who controls Malacañang Palace after 2028. What began as quiet tension inside the government has evolved into accusations, resignations, impeachment proceedings, Senate power struggles, and open political confrontation. Across the country, Filipinos are now witnessing the rise of what many analysts describe as the biggest political feud since the return of the Marcos family to power. And for many observers, the real battle is no longer about today. It is about the presidency in 2028. The latest escalation came after the Philippine Senate formally convened as an impeachment court to try Vice President Sara Duterte. The impeachment TK centers on allegations involving confidential funds, unexplained wealth, and controversial statements interpreted as threats against President Marcos' First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos and House Speaker Martin Romualdez. Duterte has strongly denied wrongdoing and insists the accusations are politically motivated. But regardless of the final verdict, the political damage has already transformed the country's landscape. The impeachment proceedings are now widely viewed as more than a legal process. They are seen as a defining power struggle between two of the most influential political dynasties in the Philippines. For years, the Marcos and Duterte camps appeared united by a common goal: regaining and consolidating national power. Their 2022 election victory was historic. Marcos secured the presidency with one of the largest mandates in modern Philippine history, while Sara Duterte delivered massive support from Mindanao and Duterte's strongholds across the country. Together, they met a political machine that overwhelmed the opposition. At the time, many supporters believed the alliance would dominate Philippine politics for years. But behind the scenes, cracks were already beginning to form. Differences over appointments, budget priorities, foreign policy, and succession politics reportedly created tension between the two camps. As Marcos strengthened ties with the United States and expanded security cooperation in the South China Sea, some Duterte allies quietly questioned the administration's direction. The situation worsened as rival political factions competed for influence inside Congress and the cabinet. Then came one of the biggest turning points. Sara Duterte resigned from her cabinet post as Secretary of Education while remaining vice president. The move shocked many Filipinos and confirmed growing speculation that the alliance between Marcos and Duterte was falling apart. From that moment forward, the political atmosphere changed dramatically. Public criticism intensified. Political allies began choosing sides. Senate figures repositioned themselves, and rumors about the 2028 presidential race became impossible to ignore. For Sara Duterte, the presidency in 2028 represents more than political ambition. It represents the continuation of the Duterte political dynasty established by her father, former President Rodrigo Duterte. Even after leaving office, Rodrigo Duterte remains one of the most influential political figures in the country. His loyal base continues to defend his administration's policies, especially his controversial anti-drug campaign. Sara Duterte inherited much of that political support. Many analysts believe she entered the current administration already viewed as a future presidential contender. And as tensions with Marcos increased, the question became unavoidable. Could the Marcos camp attempt to stop Duterte's 2028 path before it fully begins? That question became even more explosive after Duterte's controversia. Remarks in late 2024 involving President Marcos and his family. The comments immediately triggered national outrage and security concerns. Authorities treated the issue seriously, while Duterte later disputed how her remarks were interpreted. Still, the controversy became a major political weapon against her. Critics accused the vice president of crossing dangerous lines. Supporters claimed her words were taken out of context and exaggerated for political purposes. The incident deepened divisions across the country. Soon after, impeachment complaints gained momentum inside the House of Representatives. The charges against Duterte include allegations related to misuse of confidential funds, unexplained wealth, and misconduct. Her allies insist there is no solid evidence proving criminal wrongdoing, but opponents argue that public officials must face accountability regardless of political status now. The case has reached the Senate, the same institution that will ultimately decide way their Duterte survives politically, the stakes are enormous. If convicted, Sara Duterte could be removed from office and permanently disqualified from holding public office in the future. Such an outcome would almost certainly destroy any chance of a 2028 presidential campaign. But if acquitted, the result could dramatically strengthen her. Many analysts warn that an acquittal could allow Duterte to portray herself as a political victim targeted by powerful enemies inside the administration. That narrative could energize her supporters and make her even more dangerous politically heading into the next election cycle. In other words, the impeachment trial could either end her presidential ambitions or launch them. Meanwhile, President Marcos faces his own political calculations. Although Marcos has repeatedly emphasized that the impeachment process belongs to Congress and should follow constitutional procedures, critics continue to question whether powerful figures close to the administration are influencing the political campaign against Duterte. Marcos himself must carefully balance several risks. If the administration appears too aggressive against Duterte, it could backfire among voters who still support the Duterte family. But if Marcos appears weak or indecisive, rival factions may see an opportunity to challenge his influence before his term ends. The president also understands that 2028 will shape how history judges his administration. Because Philippine presidents are limited to a single 6-year term, Marcos cannot run again in 2028. That means the next presidential election will determine whether his political allies retain power after he leaves office. For the Marcos camp, allowing Sara Duterte to win the presidency could potentially reverse key policies, weaken Marcos' allies, and reshape national priorities. That is why many political observers now believe the current conflict is not simply personal, it is strategic, it is about succession, it is about who controls the future. Inside the Senate, the battle has become even more dramatic. Political maneuvering among senators has intensified as lawmakers prepare for one of the most closely watched impeachment trials in modern Philippine history. Every vote matters, every alliance matters, and every public statement is now carefully analyzed for signs of loyalty or betrayal. Some senators are openly aligned with the Marcos camp. Others are closely associated with Duterte allies. Several remain publicly neutral while quietly navigating enormous political pressure behind the scenes. The Senate itself has effectively become the center of the country's political storm. One particularly controversial figure is Senator Ronald Beto de la Rosa, a close Duterte ally and former police chief under Rodrigo Duterte's administration. De la Rosa remains a highly polarizing figure because of his connection to the former administration's anti-drug operations. Recent political developments involving him triggered further tension and even security concerns around the Senate complex. His reappearance in national politics reminded Filipinos that the Duterte network remains active, organized, and willing to fight aggressively. At the same time, House Speaker Martin Romualdez, a cousin of President Marcos, continues to play a major role in the administration's political strategy. Romualdez is widely considered one of the most powerful figures in government and is frequently viewed as a key architect of congressional support for the administration. For Duterte supporters, Romualdez symbolizes the growing concentration of political power around the Marcos camp. For administration allies, he represents stability and discipline inside Congress. This growing rivalry between political dynasties is now influencing nearly every major issue in Philippine politics. Foreign policy debates are increasingly viewed through the lens of internal political competition. Economic controversies are interpreted politically. Even Senate investigations and budget hearings have become arenas for factional conflict. Across social media, supporters from both sides are fighting daily information wars. The country is becoming politically polarized, and ordinary Filipinos are increasingly asking whether national governance is now being overshadowed by succession politics. At the center of everything remains one unavoidable reality: 2028 has already begun. Even though the next presidential election is still years away, political positioning is happening now. Every impeachment hearing, every Senate vote, every cabinet reshuffle, every public speech, all of it is being viewed through the lens of the next battle for Malacañang Palace. Sara Duterte understands that surviving politically may be more important than immediate popularity. Marcos understands that preserving his coalition is essential for protecting his administration's legacy after his term ends. Neither side can afford to lose, and that is why the conflict keeps escalating. The collapse of the UniTeam alliance has transformed Philippine politics into a high-stakes power struggle filled with uncertainty and political survival. What once looked like a partnership for national unity has turned into one of the country's most dramatic political confrontations. For some Filipinos, the situation represents necessary democratic accountability. For others, it represents political persecution. But regardless of political perspective, one thing is now undeniable. The battle between Marcos and Duterte is no longer hidden behind closed doors. It is unfolding in Congress, in the Senate, across television screens, and throughout the entire country. And the outcome may decide not only the future of Sara Duterte and Ferdinand Marcos Jr., but also the direction of Philippine democracy itself. The question now is no longer whether the war for 2028 has started. The question is, who will survive it?